So let's continue with factoring out GCF. So here we have negative 12b to the third plus 10b squared minus 2b. So of 12, 10, and 2, can you tell that 2 is going to be the GCF? Because they're all even. And then of b to, I'm having problems with this pen, b to the third, b squared, and b to the first, b is going to be my GCF of the variables. So we put in the parens. So what is negative 12b to the third divided by 2b? That's going to be 6b squared. What is 10b squared divided by the GCF, 2b? That's going to be positive 5b. And then what is negative 2b divided by 2b? That's minus 1. So here I have factored. And let's just check. 2b times 6b squared is 12b to the third. Okay, do you see a mistake? I wasn't looking for 12b to the third. I was looking for negative 12b to the third. So I forgot the negative sign. Now let's check. 2b times negative 6b is negative 12b to the third. 2b times 5b is 10b squared. And 2b times negative 1 is negative 2b. Is that what I started with? Yes, it is. So it checks out. So go ahead and try practice 5. Now as we look at classroom example 6, this is a form that we actually really like. You're going to find that we are going to try to get expressions in this form, where I have something multiplied by a binomial, and another term multiplied by the binomial. What that means is the binomial y minus 1 is common to both terms. So then we're going to open our parens, and what's left? The other factor is going to be x minus 13. So y minus 1 times x, there's my first term. Y minus 1 times negative 13, there's my second term. So we really like when a binomial is common to the two terms in an expression. How do I know that I have factored? This is a subtraction problem. This is a multiplication problem. When you have created expressions that are multiplied together, you have factored. Here I would multiply. So I've factored. Moving up a little, here I've multiplied. So that's how I know that I have factored my expressions. All right, so here's this pattern that we really like. 2m plus 9 is in the first term and the second term. 2m plus 9 is going to be my first factor. And then this is like a negative 1 understood. The other factor is going to be 5x squared y to the third minus 1. So my first term is 5x squared y to the third times my binomial minus 1 times my binomial. I'll give you another example here. If I had 7x times x plus 4 plus 5 times x plus 4. I say, I really like that because the x plus 4 is common to both terms. The other factor would be my 7x and my plus 5. So why don't you go ahead and try practice 10. Okay, so if we look at example 8 and then example 9, whenever you have 4 terms, 1, 2, 3, 4, remember terms are separated by pluses and minuses. Here in the next example, again, 4 terms, 1, 2, 3, 4. When you have 4 terms, your technique is going to be factor by grouping. You're going to try to take the terms 2 at a time, 2 terms grouped together. Okay, so I'm going to group these 2 together and these 2 together and see if I actually have a common factor. So, forgetting this third and the fourth term, let's just look at AB plus 4A. Of those 2 terms, I can factor out an A. And I'm left with B plus 4. Go ahead and do a check. A times B is AB. A times 4 is 4A. Now I'm going to look at the second set, the second group, my third and fourth term. This is what I really want. I really want a B plus 4. I'm really hoping that I can get a B plus 4 common out of those third and fourth expressions there, third and fourth terms. So what can I factor out of 7b and 28? Don't forget the sign. I can factor out a common, greatest common factor would be a 7. If I factor out the 7 from the 7b, I get b. If I factor out a 7 from the 28, I get 4. Let's do a little check. 7 times b is 7b. 7 times 4 is 28. And look what I've just created. By grouping these 2 terms together and these 2 terms together, I now have b plus 4 is one of my factors, and a plus 7 is the other factor. If you want to see how this works, let's show that b plus 4 times a plus 7 is what I originally started with. We're going to use FOIL. Remember, these are binomials. My first, my outside, my inside, and my last. First, b times a is ab. Outside, b times 7 is 7b. Inside, 4 times a is 4a. And last, 4 times 7 is 28. Is that what I started with? AB, 4a, 7b, and 28. Yep, it checks. So go ahead and try practice 11. All right, so if we look at example 9, again we have 1, 2, 3, 4 terms. So our technique when we have 4 terms for factoring is factor by grouping. If I factor these 2 together and these 2 together, is there any common factor other than a 1 between 3xy and negative 4? No, they don't have anything common. So I might have to swap the order of some of my terms. Let's swap the x and the negative 4. 3xy plus x minus 4 minus 12y. I still have 4 terms. All I did was swap the second and the third term. Swap the order. Let's factor by grouping. So now from my first 2, I can factor out an x, which is going to leave me with, if I factor out an x here, I'm going to be left with a 3y. And if I factor out an x here, I'm going to be left with a 1. All right, well, you know what I really want? I really want a 3y plus 1 over here. Am I going to get a 3y plus 1? Is that even a possibility from these terms? Not in the order they're currently listed, so I'm going to swap this order again too. I'm going to make that negative 12y minus 4. Now factor by grouping. So I've got x times 3y plus 1. And between negative 12y and negative 4, I can factor out a negative 4, which is going to leave me with a 3y. Negative 4 times a positive 1 is negative 4. And I'm very happy because that means that 3y plus 1 is my first factor and x minus 4 is my other factor. And if you want to check your work, you would do FOIL. First, outside, inside, last. For these, we'll do it quickly. 3y times x is 3xy. My outside is going to be negative 12y. My inside is going to be a 1x, and my last is minus 4. Is that what I started with? 3xy minus 4, 1x, negative 12y. Yep, so it checked.